Hello, I'm Julie Lee, and I'd like to welcome you to this special in-studio episode of Maranatha Mission Stories. Today, we're recapping the recent service project of the Amazing Facts International team. The media ministry group also included members of the organization's affiliate congregation here in the Sacramento region of California, the Granite Bay Hilltop Seventh-day Adventist Church. A little later, I'll be joined by Amazing Facts President and Granite Bay Hilltop Pastor Doug Batchelor to unpack his service experience. But first, let's take a look at what this trip was all about.
Be humble, be patient, recognize, look for God's leading, and focus on the people that you're ministering to. Those are the three things that we want to keep in mind as we move forward on this mission trip. And thank you again for being here. We know it's a commitment on your part. It's time, it's money to be here. But you know, it's more blessed to give than to receive. Amen?
Amazing Facts International and the Granite Bay Hilltop Adventist Church recruited a group of 148 volunteers to serve with Maranatha in the Dominican Republic in April 2025.
This is your third one. All right, boy. You got different medal. How many up for the first time? First mission trip. Wow, you're on the first side, but all right, welcome everybody.
Thank you for tuning in.
Amazing Facts International is a California-based media ministry with an array of evangelistic offerings for print, radio, and television. Its large international following and the Granite Bay Hilltop Church's nearly 1,300 members help account for the project's impressive attendance. Organizing a group of this size requires careful planning and coordination. The big team had big plans for their Caribbean stay. A subgroup of volunteers undertook the construction of a 1,920 square foot church building for the Lucero del Almirante congregation in East Santo Domingo. It's a church overflowing with dedicated members, but they lacked an adequate meeting place.
That's the main rules for laying blocks. So the beginning is gonna be like a little bit difficult, but with the practice, you're gonna become professional.
It was a project best suited for those not afraid to get their hands dirty.
We started off with, they already had some of the blocks down, and so we just started off. They showed us how to do it, we started doing it, and we did more than they expected apparently, and I think it looks good. I tried to supervise more than not, but I don't know what I'm doing, so they kicked me out of supervision.
Volunteers made steady progress with the guidance of Maranatha's in-country construction crew members.
Keep that up. It doesn't have to be straight up, just has to be flat. Let's go down real slow like this.
We built 3 layers of bricks. Four
Layers.
4 layers of bricks, yeah.
Yeah, and just maybe even had to make sure the bricks were level for the windows tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's,
Hot and sweaty, but it was good work.
I gotta get a drink.
Even the team's younger members pitched in. Volunteers' endurance and meticulous attention to detail produced a set of strong walls. In fact, the structure was built so well that it's now the designated hurricane shelter for its neighborhood. Their work on the job site also built strong connections among volunteers. Lucero del Almirante members now have sturdy walls, and Amazing Facts volunteers have new friendships, both of which were built to last. In addition to a church building, the group intended to provide free dental and medical care, but this plan hit a snag before the project even began. The team's medical and dental supplies arrived in the Dominican Republic on Sunday, the day before work began. Unfortunately, customs officials took that day off, so the tubs sat at the airport with no one to approve them for entry. Without access to their supplies, the medical team couldn't provide near the services they had hoped, if any at all. Thankfully, one customs official was a Seventh-day Adventist and available to help. The tubs were released in time to operate clinics the next day.
All right, well, we're here today in the Dominican Republic at our medical and dental clinic. We have brought a team of probably about 24 to 25 medical and dental providers, along with our other staff of about 100 total individuals helping in the clinic this week.
Dental insurance isn't common in the Dominican Republic, and most people can't afford dental care on their own. Because of this, volunteer dentists had a never-ending supply of patients.
We've been able to provide extractions, fillings, dental cleanings, along with a number of other evaluation services from the dental team.
The medical team had a packed waiting area of their own. At a clinic open to the general public, providers had to be ready to address any number of ailments. Like this little girl who showed up with an extra finger on each hand. At the time, the digits were relatively harmless, but they had the potential to impair function in adjacent fingers as the girl grew. After applying a local anesthetic, providers surgically removed the extra digits and used sutures to close the girl's wounds. The clinic was only operational for 4 days, but medical volunteers were able to address many immediate needs and educate patients on habits that will impact their health in the long run.
We also have here our team of health education specialists who have been providing health education for chronic lifestyle disease, management and prevention of diabetes, high blood pressure.
The team also dedicated attention to patients' spiritual well-being.
And our team members have been providing spiritual counseling to our patients who we've been attending to here. Because most importantly, overall, what we want to do is provide good patient care, but we also want to provide appropriate spiritual care, because all of us are here to really support the work of evangelism.
The medical and dental teams were able to see roughly 1,000 patients by project's close. Thanks to their specialized skill sets, these providers brought healing to the sick and wounded. But it was their warm smiles and selfless care that spread the life-changing love of Jesus. Amazing Facts and Granite Bay Hilltop volunteers also carried out several forms of community outreach. One group led vacation Bible school programs at a local public school. Volunteers played games with students, taught arts and crafts, and acted out Bible stories. Partway through the project, Amazing Facts President and Granite Bay Hilltop Senior Pastor Doug Batchelor and Associate Pastor John Ross stopped by a local radio station to speak during a primetime program. They used the opportunity to promote 2 large programs they had planned for the last Sabbath of the trip.
Takes place in the future. They say there's a rapture.
These Sabbath gatherings were going to be an exciting chance to share the gospel with Adventist church members and the general population of Santo Domingo. But the programs took on an entirely new significance in the aftermath of a terrible tragedy. In the early morning hours of April 8th, the concrete roof of a large Santo Domingo nightclub suddenly collapsed. At the time of the disaster, it was the venue of a large concert. The building was packed. 225 people were injured. 233 people died. and 189 escaped the rubble alive. In response to such a shocking loss, the President of the Dominican Republic issued a 6-day period of mourning. All public events were canceled while the country paid respects to celebrities, strangers, friends, and loved ones who were taken too soon and without warning. But the President made an exception for the Amazing Facts events. What better time to hear messages of hope and love than in the midst of such darkness? On Sabbath morning, attendees packed the venue. Crowds gathered under nearby trees. Roughly 10,000 people came to hear Pastors Batchelor and Ross speak.
Your name will come up before the Father.
And several chose to dedicate their lives to Jesus. The afternoon program was held at an outdoor amphitheater and was attended by 6,000. During a time of upheaval, entire neighborhoods were pointed to the Prince of Peace. It was the volunteer group's final offering and one received by thousands of listening hearts. When we come back, hear Amazing Facts President and Granite Bay Hilltop Pastor Doug Batchelor discuss the trip during a special in-studio interview.
Welcome back to this special in-studio episode of Maranatha Mission Stories. I'm joined by Amazing Facts President and Granite Bay Hilltop Senior Pastor Doug Batchelor to speak on his recent service trip with Maranatha in the Dominican Republic. Thank you for being here, Pastor Doug. We're so glad to have you in our studio today.
Thank you, Julie. It's a delight.
Now, to review, we just watched an episode where we saw a team of 148 volunteers go to the Dominican Republic to build a church and do outreach. And you were right there alongside all of the volunteers, your colleagues and church members, laying block walls. Was that as fun as it looked?
It was, and I had not done very much of it, and I did it with a Maranatha group 20 years earlier, so I hadn't laid any block in a long time. And so I actually had one of the 10-year-olds who had been there a day earlier showing me how to do it. So it was humbling and also really neat.
Well, hey, kudos to that 10-year-old. Now you're most well known as a speaker and an author, but what was it like to move away from the podium, step away from the computer, and work on a mission trip construction site?
Well, you probably hear this all the time. I'm sure that the people that were engaged in this got a bigger blessing than the blessing that they shared. And so just the camaraderie, working with the people there, the locals were so appreciative, and we built friends with them. And I speak a little Spanish, but a lot of it was done through translators, and so we just had fun communicating and eating the food with them, and just working together. It just builds a bond that's really exciting.
Now, in addition to construction, your team also did quite a bit of outreach. You had medical and dental clinics and children's ministries, but you did hit a snag early on in the week when your supplies for the medical and dental clinics were stuck in customs, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a real crisis because we had like 25 of these plastic bins that were full of medical supplies that the different groups had, everybody that flew out said, I'll take a bin. And they had the dental equipment, the medical equipment, just everything we needed, the supplies and medications. And the custom agents at the airport said, oh, no, we don't have permission. You can't bring these in. It may take several days to clear customs. Well, our trip would be over. And so one of the pastors that was helping with the program, he happened to know somebody that was just under the president in charge of, I think, the health work in the Dominican Republic, or DR. And he gave a call and said, look, we've got 150 people that have come to serve and give free medical help and dental help, and their supplies are stuck at the airport. And we were all praying, Well, they made a couple of phone calls. All of a sudden they said, oh, it's all good. You can go. And so the Lord just removed that obstacle. We just saw that as a miracle.
For sure. You weren't panicking at any time. You were kind of a guy who's calm under crisis, or?
Well, I wasn't panicked. I think some were a little concerned, but I just figured this is God's work, and so He'll work it out, and He did.
The customs-related issue, I'm sure, was stressful for a lot of people, but then your project ran into another challenge. This time it was a lot more serious, with the entire country experiencing a terrible tragedy. Tell us what happened briefly in Santo Domingo while you were there.
Well, so the program, we were there about a week, and about halfway through, I came to the meal one morning and someone said, "Did you hear what happened last night?" And evidently there is a very large nightclub there, and it's used for birthday parties and different events called the Jet Club or something. And the roof just collapsed while it had 500 people in the building. Now in America, when you say a roof collapse, you're thinking a wooden roof. But when you're in the Dominican Republic, they're concrete. And so the roof collapsing, if you're under that, it's just a death sentence. And so
I read that there were 225 injured, 233 people actually killed.
Yeah.
Right?
Can you imagine that? It's like a plane, a full plane crashing. 232 people. And DR's, it's not like North America where we have 300 million people.
It's a small country.
Everybody there knew somebody or had family that was involved in the tragedy. And so all of a sudden the whole country is just plunged into this pall of mourning. And which it kind of gave a new emphasis to the work we were doing with the medical work, and they were doing counseling work and the dental work, and they really seemed to appreciate that people were coming in. And then they invited us to a radio program where we did an interview. We were praying with people over the air. But it turned into a problem and an opportunity.
Yes, because the president of the country actually put a 6-day moratorium on any kind of public gatherings. Is that accurate?
All the flags were half-mast in the country. It was a national mourning.
So you couldn't have any kind of events?
Political leaders, movie stars, singers, baseball stars that we even know in the States all died instantly. And so they said, we're canceling all public events. Well, our group had coordinated with all the churches in DR to come together and rented a facility that seats, like 8,000 people to have a final celebration of our week.
On Sabbath, right?
Yes, that was going to be Sabbath.
So you'd been the mission trip was going to culminate in this, right?
Yeah, invite all the people that we had met. And so we really prayed, and the pastor, who is a very resourceful man, the president, I should say, he was the conference president. They all prayed, we're all praying, and they called the mayor, I believe. And I think the word went to the president of the country, and they said, now we're having this event, it's going to be a day of prayer for the nation. You don't want us to cancel the day of prayer for the nation, do we? And they said, oh, no, don't cancel that.
Wow.
So we got permission from the highest department that we were going to have our day, which was called the Day of Brotherhood. And they said, now we're making it a day of brotherhood and prayer. And people who normally would never have come all began to come to this day of prayer for the nation. And, there was hymn singing, there was prayer and ministry and teaching. And
did you have to modify any part of your sermon because of what had happened? What did you do?
Yes, I did. Well, you might wonder about this, but I actually talked about when the walls of Jericho fell in.
And that wasn't planned, or
no,
you modified it?
Yeah, so, and because, people could resonate with that, but I showed God saving people from that. And we turned it into a message of, of grace and comfort, but also how quickly life can end. And, we need to be ready. And so, but people were very responsive. And I think people in the DR, they have, coming from a Catholic background, they have a very strong sense of reverence growing up. And so the Lord just turned what would have otherwise been a real tragedy, He turned it around and brought a lot of good from it, though it was still, of course, a terrible tragedy. Did
you get a sense of the energy in that venue as you were going through this special Sabbath program? What was it like in there?
Well, where you might normally have prayer that was sort of a ritual, the prayers were very heartfelt. And all of the prayers up front, and there were many, and the mayor came. of Santo Domingo. And all of the prayers were very relevant for the people they knew were hurting. The nation was hurting. And they also just sensed how precarious life was. You know, Jesus talked about a wall that fell and people suddenly died in Siloam. And he said, life is uncertain. And he says, these people were not sinners. You know, everyone thought they died in a nightclub, they're sinners. Well, they were celebrating a birthday party. And so I tried to emphasize that, you know, Jesus said, do not think these people that died when the wall fell were sinners above other people. And that all of us need to turn to God. And so that really became an opportunity to just appeal to everybody.
Well, it's a tragedy that certainly feels like it was turned into a miracle and a message that people needed to hear. And so that's amazing. Regarding the trip as a whole, when you look back on everything that you did, from the construction for a church construction for a congregation that really needed the medical and dental and children's outreach, and then this final event that welcomed people in to give them hope in their time of need. Sounds like quite an experience. How would you assess your whole week in the Dominican Republic?
Well, I can tell you that nobody that went will ever be the same. It impacted their lives. We're hoping and trusting it impacted the lives of the church that we built. And we, Danny, who pulled Jack, he said, this group got more done in less time than many groups. I mean, everybody, because we had so many people. And some were contractors, and the walls went up from nothing to as far as they could go. And they said, this church is going to be a hurricane shelter for the neighborhood. And we've got aerial shots of, this is where people are going to come. So the whole neighborhood is impacted by the church. The whole neighborhood was impacted by the medical work at another location, and then visiting an orphanage and the children's ministry, and just the whole spectrum. And doing service together just bonds the members of our church that came. So it's a blessing coming and going in every way.
Talk a little bit more about that. Why do you think service projects like this are an important part of the Amazing Facts ministry?
Well, you know, Jesus said it's more blessed to give than receive. And when we give our time, it's different than just, you know, making a donation or going to church. When you go into another culture and you experience, you know, our lifestyle and standard is a lot better than a lot of folks in Santo Domingo. And so going and seeing that, we come back feeling much more appreciative of the blessings we have and more willing to share that others might, you know, have some of those blessings. So it just is transformational in every way.
Now, you're Pastor Doug. You've seen it all. You've done a lot, traveled the world. But how did this experience affect you personally and in your relationship with God?
Well, some of the same ways I mentioned is it just was a blessing. It was humbling for me. It's exciting. And you know, we have a large church. I get to know our members better in a different, you don't just see them sitting in the pew. You're working alongside them. You're getting to know them on a different level. And they get to know you differently. They see me pick up a welder, you know, and work with them and shoveling. And so it just changes the whole relationship. It makes it more real. And so I just really feel like it was such an incredible bonding experience for us, as well as we trust a blessing for the people there in DR.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us more of your perspective on what happened, and we thank you for going on this mission trip with Maranatha.
Well, thank you, Julie. We're looking forward to doing it again.
Would love to see that. Maranatha helps private groups like Amazing Facts and the Granite Bay Hilltop Church organize service trips around the world. We do it because serving others shifts our priorities. Experiencing the world's diversity broadens our perspectives, and forming unlikely connections transforms our hearts. See for yourself. Visit maranatha.org/volunteer to get started.